So we're going to get going. I just would love to welcome everybody to this Zoom program. We're very excited to have Jim and James with us today. This is Propagating Pollinator Plants from Seed with Jim Sirch. He is the education coordinator at the Yale Peabody Museum of Natural History. Jim was the past president and is currently on the board of the Hamden Land Conservation Trust. He is a certified Connecticut master gardener. Jim gives talks throughout the state on gardening for pollinators and growing native plants from seed, and he's dedicated to helping improve backyard biodiversity. He is also a member of the Connecticut Native Plant Working Group, which is a statewide task force encouraging citizens to use local native plants. Jim was featured in the Members Making a Difference section of the summer 2016 issue of the American Horticultural Society's American Gardener magazine. And he's also authors a weekly nature blog called Beyond Your Back Door, which is located at www.beyondyourbackdoor.net. Jim, are you going to be giving out a flyer with that info? Is that going to have that?
I should have that on my site, but you know what? Actually, I will send a link when I send resources. So yeah,
we're gonna have some resources that we're going to send out to the group afterwards, and we'll include that. Also, I did sign up for the subscription yesterday.
I saw. Thank you.
Which I'm excited for. Yeah. So we're very excited to have Jim do the presentation, and without further ado, I am recording the session as well, just FYI for everybody. So if you do have to leave early or you want to watch it again, we are going to have the link available of the recorded video at some point after this presentation. So without further ado, everybody, Jim Sirch and James.
Thanks so much, Sue. All right, I want to share my screen here. We'll get that going. Let's see. Oh, I want to let me see if I can get the pointer. That would be good. Spotlight. All right. Now, good. I got that. If I can full screen, if you only would do that, that would be nice. Looks like it already is. Okay. Does everybody see that? Or do you, Sue?
Yes.
Is it full screen?
For me, I see your whole presentation.
Cool. All right. Well, I want to thank Sue and the Lyme Land Trust, and also Melissa and the Friends of the Lyme Public Library, as well as the Lyme Pollinator Pathway. So it sounds like you have a very active group, and but I really appreciate your support. So I'll be talking about how we propagate native plants or native wildflowers from seed, and today, and just do a little slight demo as we go. It's just a very simple thing to do, but this is the time to actually do that. So if you have seed that you collected, January is like the prime time to do that. And we're gonna talk about the strategies that different kinds of plants use in order to germinate. Okay, so
Jim, just to clarify what I see, I can see your whole PowerPoint program.
Yep, but you don't see it's not full screen then.
I think if you click on resume slideshow.
Okay, let's see. There we resume share.
Oh, no.
How about nope? Hold on a sec. I'm gonna stop. Let me get out of that. Okay, I'll stop share and try this again. Hold on a second.
That was it for a second. It was there.
Oh, it was there for a second. Okay, let me just,
1 second.
Sorry. Okay. How about now?
Beautiful.
Great. Okay, we'll get rolling here. Sorry about that delay. Well, I just wanted to talk about some kind of environmental issues before we begin, because you'll see how that fits into my talk here, how we kind of moved from that to seeds and why we would do that. But it comes as no surprise to everybody who's listening today, and I thank you all for joining us, that we are through time losing open space. We're losing biodiversity. And it's kind of sobering to think that we're going to be in, by the year 2050, in the blue range, where there's lots of acreage of forest loss. And so we're increasingly becoming more urban. And as anybody who's seen a talk by Doug Ptolemy, his whole feeling is that we have to create this homegrown national park and take all these yards that you see and connect them together with planting native plants and losing the lawn. So that is one way that we all could help biodiversity. So there are issues with our native insects. There is species loss in our butterflies. We're overdue to have another butterfly atlas project, because it was, over 20 years ago when it was done. But back then there were state listed species. There are also losses and declines in our migratory songbirds, those neotropical migrants that come up here to nest, and even some of our regular visitors as well. And really has to do with a number of factors. Definitely habitat loss is a really big factor. This wood thrush feeding a caterpillar on blacktop, that's not its, it's not its habitat. It normally feeds in the leaf litter, right? So, and I always am hitting home that lose the leaves. We just had, in the fall, you probably have heard all the leaf blowers, those 2-cycle engines that put out a lot of pollution. But, I'm really advocating for everybody to put leaves underneath our trees and shrubs so that the caterpillars can go into the ground and then become a cocoon and overwinter. Now that would help with some of our moths and butterflies and moths that do that. So we also have a decline in our bumblebees and other native bees. You've heard in the news that whole insect Armageddon that declines. People aren't seeing the insects on their the windshields of their car like they used to, right? When you're going through some or certain areas. This was, we actually made the news in our country with a new federally endangered bumblebee was listed. The rusty patch bumblebee. About 20 years ago, this was really common. 20 or 30 years ago, it was pretty common in Connecticut. And it's now been extirpated. It's extinct here. It is living out in the Midwest in a few areas. So yeah, we really have to think about what we can do to help our native wildlife. So lots of issues as to why that's happening. A real big one for our native bees, as you probably know, is some of the pesticides that we're putting out. We as a people include neonicotinoids that go into the stem, into the pollen, into the nectar, and they're systemic insecticides and really causing major problems for our insects. So I really advocate for trying not to use pesticides and do it in, if you were to do it at all, do it at the right time with the right amount. But I don't use them. So we really need to think about how we can help our native bees. We also have invasive species. So, we're hit on a number of fronts, right? In my yard, I have Oriental bittersweet on the edges and garlic mustard. I'm battling that. Yeah, I've been fairly successful starting to put in cut up wood chips with on top of wet cardboard. That seems that's been helping out. There's been a number of presentations lately about that, but there are many. It's always a constant battle. But we have to think about why, and I did mention this already, why use native plants. This was a slide originally from Doug Ptolemy, and think about also the insects that feed on leaves, right? So, on our native oaks, 470 species of caterpillars. The number is a little higher down south where Doug Ptolemy lives, but here in Connecticut, 470 kinds of caterpillars, different kinds of larvae, caterpillar larvae, butterfly and moth larvae are feeding on oak leaves. Whereas our invasive plants, for example, like this is not an invasive plant, this is a ginkgo, but it is non-native. There are only 4 kinds of caterpillars that are feeding on it. So that really hits home the idea that we want insects to feed on our leaves, because if you have a chickadee nesting in your yard or nearby, they need about 9,000 caterpillars to 6,000 to 9,000 caterpillars to be successful. That was some research done, I guess, with Ptolemy and his graduate students. So really need to think about how we can put in more native plants. We also need to think about losing the lawn. That's a biological desert. And I'm gradually doing that, year by year. It's overwhelming if you think about a lawn this size to gradually replace that, but just a little bit at a time is the key. And we have the dubious distinction in Connecticut of having some of the highest surface area covered by turf, covered by golf courses and lawns. So that's not good. So we need to reverse that. We need to think about what we can do to gradually put in native plants. And an easy way to do that is from seed. So there's my switch over, right? So this is a great way to inexpensively get a lot of plants. So we are going to be helping pollinators and other wildlife by putting in native plants and doing that from seed. So, and also if you could think about the cultivars that you would buy, say in a nursery, usually the plants that we buy in a nursery are propagated clonally, which they might take a cutting or they might take a tiny piece and clone that. So it's the same plant over and over again. Whereas doing it from seed, you are actually preserving the genetic diversity. You're having a variety of different genetic makeup, within each plant. Each plant is not the same thing. So perhaps some plants that you might raise from seed could better adapt to climate change through time. So, and other environmental conditions, a lack of water or whatever. So, and there has been research done with Annie White up at University of Vermont and other folks that have been showing that that wild plants typically are better for pollinators. What really hasn't been studied, a lot of people study visits for insects, how many insects are visiting, how many native bees are, say, visiting plants. But, what is a little bit harder to study is how much nectar or pollen they're getting. So if you buy a pom-pom echinacea, a purple coneflower that looks like a little pom-pom type thing, it's replaced all its petals and it's actually replaced all its sexual parts with petals. So you don't really have the nectar and pollen that you would get. So those single flowers are much better. But anyway, as I did mention this, it's a really cheap way to get a lot of plants. And there's something to be said for after you've planted these plants to going around and looking at your bed, and seeing your beds or your preserve or whatever where you're planting these seeds, to think about those plants and think, wow, I grew that from a seed. That's really neat. It's something that feels good that you're really helping. So, and if you were to go out and collect seed from the wild, I just would please try to just only collect a little bit in any one area, about 5% or so, and also a little bit from any one plant. So that's because, think about it, the plant wants to replace itself. And, it has a lot of things going on that's, against it. If you think about invasives for one. So, we want to have those plants being replaced, but so that's, another reason for that. So, okay. Well, let's get into the nitty gritty here a little bit. And I am not going to read this word for word. This is a lot of words on one slide, but it's just to say that different seeds have different strategies to keep from germinating at once. If you think about it, what if a seed was planted in the late summer or fall, and then germinated right away when the winter chill comes on, in the freezing. So it would not do well. So all these seeds have different strategies. They're pretty cool. Many of seeds in the pea family have a hard seed coat that might take a little bit of sandpaper for a few seconds, 30 seconds or so or less, to rub against that. And some require the freezing and thawing. Many of our seeds do in order to germinate. They have to go through a cold period. And that cold period is called stratification. We're gonna learn about that a little bit more. Some seeds might have a fleshy fruit, and they might have to pass through an animal, and they get fertilized along the way, which is a kind of a cool thing. I'm not going to show you any today, but there are certain, particularly out west, there are some seeds that are only germinated through fire or hot temperatures. Also think about some of our pines are often that way too. All right, and then there's some of the seeds that really need to have some of that, say, for example, a fleshy coating on the outside of a seed that has a chemical that inhibits the seed from germinating. All of you that have grown tomatoes from seed, that's what you do, right? You take off that outer covering and you'll get rid of that. Our new puppy is, sorry if it's barking, I hope you can't hear that. And then it will germinate after that. So there are some that have chemical inhibitors that way. So some might need light to germinate as well. So there's just various kinds of strategies. And I'm going to show you examples of most of that today. Two resources, and by the way, I'm going to include kind of an extensive resource that we'll email out to you. So don't write frantically as far as resources. You don't have to write this down because you're going to get it. But I highly recommend Bill Kalina's books, unfortunately not in print anymore, but Growing and Propagating Wildflowers, and also the native trees and shrubs and vines are, those are two of the best books on native plant propagation that I think, bar none, some of the best that I've seen. And so I highly recommend them. And I love his writing. He's kind of humorous at the same time too. But if you can find this like at a vintage bookstore or any of these, go for it. Also, there is a free resource online, and I'm going to give you the links for that in the resources when they're sent out afterwards. Norman Dino was a professor emeritus in chemistry. He was a real scientist. He experimented with like thousands of different plants, seeds, and figured out what they need to germinate. He exposed, the same plant's seeds to various things and figured out what works best, and then had all these germination codes. And we have that available free. The USDA actually put it on the web, which is really great. And I love what he says at the end: to plant a seed is a noble deed. Propagation is conservation. It is. And so you're helping with conservation if you can start doing native plants from seed. So here I am in the fall, late summer, early fall. Looks like I'm taking the seed heads off of Bowman's root. And for the majority of our plants, they're going to require a stratification. We're stratifying here. What it means is cold, wet temperatures for about 60 days, and then cold, wet temperatures. And then once it hits 70 degrees or so for a little while, it will germinate. So it's give or take a little bit, but it's 60 to 90 days. And what you do first, though, this is for majority of seeds. I'm going to show you some exceptions, but for the majority of seeds, what you need to do is put seeds in a bag, and the seed, you could do it, just leave the seed heads in and take the seeds off later. That's fine. And then put it in leave it in the bag to dry out in a not wet place for, I'd say a week to 2 weeks. And then you can actually, begin to propagate. What I usually do is I store them first, and I'm going to show you that. So here are various kinds of germinations that different kinds of seeds need. And These letters are just assigned, they were assigned by Bill Kalina, so I'm using what he did. And if you go to, there is a place you can buy native plant seeds. It's out in the Midwest. It's called Prairie Moon Nursery. They have different germination codes. So we're just going by this today. And so if you were a seed that was an annual, and when you buy flower seeds in a packet, that's most of, for the annual flowers, that is, they usually can be sown right at 70 degrees for, it might take a few weeks, it might take up to a month before them to germinate. That's germination code A. So that's typically annuals for the most part. The B that I've already mentioned, the code B, is the one where you need 60 to 90 days, sometimes a little less depending on the seed, of moist cold at 40 degrees or so, or less. That's fine. It can freeze, that's fine. But once it thaws out and stays around 70 or so for a little bit, it will then germinate. Now, there are some wildflowers, particularly our spring ephemerals, and I'm going to show you some examples, like bloodroot, that have a double dormancy. They're not going to germinate until they go 40, 70, 40, 70. So it's the second year they will germinate. It might be multiple cycles. And that brings up a point. Some of our seeds might not all germinate the first year, and some of them will germinate later. If you think about it, nature wants to not put all of its eggs in one basket and wants to, have a little insurance. So sometimes even the regular bee germination seeds that you put in, some might germinate the following year. So if you don't have a lot of germination first year, if you can keep that seed mix moist and it doesn't fry, it's in a cool area, eastern location or so, it will germinate even more, the seeds later on. So, okay, so we've gone to the C code, and then some just don't need a full year, but they might come out, say a seed that like maybe on a shrub, that one of those, maybe a berry or so, that might fall to the ground in kind of late spring and might need to go through the summer at about 70 degrees or so, and then go through the winter and they'll germinate the following year. So that's code D. Some have the physical or chemical inhibitors, think tomatoes, but think also there are some wild plants that do that as well. Some of our native shrubs. Oh, Jack in the pulpit would be one of those. It has a fleshy outer covering. You have to remove that. Yeah, another one would be, I'm going to show you another one. And sometimes I'll just soak it for a week and let it moisten in water, and then I'll do that. But I'll talk to you about that in just a little bit. Some seeds, particularly the real fine and small seeds, will germinate, really need light to germinate. And you're going to sow those right on the surface. And then some, I can mention the members of the pea family in particular, have hard seed coats, and you need what's called scarification. You might need to rub it through a little bit of 2 layers of sandpaper for a little bit, and then it will loosen that up. If you've done peas, you might know that some peas, you nick the seed coat, same idea. You can nick the seed as well. All right. And some of our wildflowers, particularly those spring ephemerals, need to stay moist. If they dry out, they die. So you have to keep them moist the whole time. That's the exception to that, that paper bag thing would not work in a paper bag. So, for example, this is one that's hydrophilic. Here we have bloodroot. This is the flower, and it has that double dormancy. It's that C code for the Bill Kalina they use, and it also is hydrophilic, so it cannot dry out. And it also has a really cool way to germinate. It will it has this fleshy outer covering. You can see on the right slide that little band of white stuff there. That's a fatty, it's called? It's called an elaiosome, and it has a really cool way. This is dispersed. This seed is dispersed by ants. Ants love that little elaiosome that's on the seed. So what do? They'll crawl up, take the seed, or if the seed falls, they'll gather it, they'll take it into their burrow, they'll eat that fleshy covering, and then put the seed in a dump pile. what does the ant have in a dump pile? It has dead ants, it has waste, and they're fertilizing the seed. So it's a really cool way and a great mutualism for those two species or groups, the ants and these. Another, oh yeah, white bangberry is another plant that it doesn't, this does not have an elizome. This has a fleshy covering, but it is also like bloodroot. It has a double dormancy, so it will only germinate after the second year. Now, here's the seed. You know what you can do to speed that up a little bit? What I did, I took those fruits and I put them in a glass of water, and for about a week or so, then it was easy to get that outer covering off. And you can see these little brown pie slices are the seeds. I sped up that 2-year cycle by just putting about 60 days. What I did was I put it for 60 days in the fridge, then put it on top of the fridge for another 70 days. I'm sorry, another 60 days, then put it back in the fridge. And then, so you're taking out the time a little bit than you would, which is great. So I want to stop share for just a second and show, I'm going to pinpoint the this here. I hope everybody can see that I've pinpointed the seed, this container here, which I'm going to show you, but I just wanted to point this out so you can see this a little bit better. This is for those spring ephemerals. You can, by the way, if you can't see this, you can click pin this picture, right? If you don't see this full screen, I've pinned this, but hopefully you can. By the way, I've put this in, these are the seeds that have to stay moist, and I put them in long fiber sphagnum moss. Like the long fiber moss would be what you would actually have if you grew orchids. You could buy it in the nurseries and so you can see the seeds in here. This is how I put it in a little Ziploc bag. So that's how they store it. So that seems, to work quite well to do it that way. So getting back to the share here. So this is a double dormancy, like bloodroot is doll's eyes, or the other name is white baneberry. So if I did, let me backspace here to give you the flower, white baneberry, Actea pachypoda, or doll's eyes. Right. Okay. Now we're going to look at which most of our wildflowers, our native plants, are bee germinators. Not all, there are always exceptions. And by the way, I'm going to give you a list from Bill Kalina, which is really nice. He gave me permission to use it, that has all those germination codes. Again, you can also get that from other places like Prairie Moon. It has a good germination, it tells you the seeds for those. You can look that up on their site. But anyway, this is another one. Our milkweeds are bee germinators. They need 60 to 90 days or so of cool, moist, and then warmth. And what I've done here is, you know what I'm going to do? Actually, at this point, I'm going to go back to stop share, and I'm going to pin I'm going to go back to James Sirch, which is here already. And I'm hoping that people can see this. All right. And what I've done is an easy way to actually plant is to get a clear plastic milk jug. What I've done is poked holes. If I can see this, you can see there's holes poked in the bottom. Please make sure you do that because it'll turn into a soil soup and your seeds can rot. And I filled this, as you can see, really high. I want to give the seeds a lot of root room. So I'm going to take some, I have actually some butterfly weed, because that reminded me when I saw butterfly weed that I'll plant some here for you. These are still in the pod. I wanted to show you how you can sort of easily take out seeds from the pod, which is not easily because it's going to be things kind of flying around here around me in just a minute. But if you hold all the silk, you can actually rub it at the bottom, and those seeds will then be on the surface. And how much seed do you put on there? Well, it really depends on the size of the seed. You know, little seeds, tiny seeds, you have to be careful of not putting, you know, I must have, in this case, maybe 40 seeds or so. I'm going to do it on one side of the container. And if you get a little closer.
Hey, Jim.
Yeah.
Can you screen share James Sirch, not Jim Sirch?
Oh, sure. Let
Thanks.
me do that. Yep.
Okay.
All right. Where are you? Let me go full screen view gallery. I've pinned that. Can you, let's see.
Because we're seeing you full screen. We're not.
Oh, isn't that weird?
The milk
Yeah.
jug. That's okay.
Okay, let's see if I stop my video here.
I see it right.
Actually, if you go up to the image and you click on the three dots,
Three dots, you pin that. That's what I was trying to say. Yes.
and when you
Yeah.
pin it, it becomes the primary, it becomes full screen.
Can you do that? Everybody see that? Yeah, I'm
Yes,
you all-
I've done that. It works fine.
okay. Thank you. So yeah, everybody go to the James Sirch, in the three dots, as some mentioned, there's at the top corner, right-hand corner, click on that and say pin, and you should see it. Okay. What do you think? How you're there? All right.
Got it. Thank you.
Yep. Good. Okay. So I have the butterfly weed, orange milkweed, and I'm just kind of straightening out these seeds a little bit. For the larger seeds, you want to plant about as deep as the seed. Let me try to move my hand so that it's not blocking the soil. About as deep as the soil is. So I'm just going to take a little bit of the soil from the right side. I'm actually planting, in this case, two different kinds of seeds. And you plant about the depth of the seed. Okay, so you put the seed down about the width of the seed into the soil. Now, I've also heard twice the width. You know, one to two is once to twice the width of the seed is fine. Okay, I've done that. And then I am now going to put in a seed that is, let's put a little bit more there on top of it. So I cover the seed a little bit there, about the same width. I think that we're in pretty good shape there. All right, now I'm going to now take another plant. And by the way, this is a way to store your seed. Once that you have dried it out, a good way to store it is to actually put it in the fridge any length of time. You could store a seed for a couple years and not have too much of a germination change. You'll get a little bit less germination, but what I've done here is I've put it in a Ziploc bag. And everybody know these desiccant packets that you get in vitamins and so forth? Put that seed, one of those in with your seed. If you have a little bit of seed, you can use one of these, you know, little tiny wax paper envelopes, like so. Let me see if I can get in the picture. Yep. Okay. If you have a lot of seed, envelopes, regular business envelopes or whatever are fine. Also, we all seem to need medicines these days, and pill bottles are great as well. So I'm going to take, I have some Aquilegia canadensis, some, which is, whoops, columbine or native columbine. And you can see that these seeds are quite small, right? This is an example of one of those seeds that germinates on the surface. So you're not putting this deep into the soil. You're not going to get as much germination. So I'm just going to put a little bit into my hand and take my fingers and then just kind of sprinkle it on half of this. If you wanted to, of course, I often will put an entire milk container, or you can also use soda containers. and entire milk, container in one kind. But I'm doing this for just a demonstration. And so I'm just pressing it into the soil. That's one thing, you want to get good contact with the soil. Another thing you can do to get good contact is take a spray bottle and just spray just a little bit. By the way, for our seed mix here in this case, you want to use a packaged seed mix. Potting soil is too heavy. So if a package like Jiffy or Espoma, there's a lot of different kinds of seeds, seed mixes you can use, not potting soil, but seed mix. It's lighter and you want to add water to it, and you use it until, add water until it clumps in your hand. Then you know that's about the right amount of moisture. Okay, now next, almost finished here. Next, what I'm going to do is you need something over the top of this seed like sand, or in this case, I use, and you don't have to go with and spend the money for this. This is just something that I just do. This is, it's called a Magitarium. You could get it at those pet stores like PetSmart or Petco. It's a really fine aquarium substrate, but much cheaper is like masonry sand. That's all you have to do. And you want to sprinkle it on the top of this layer. So let me do that. It's okay if it's totally white in some sections. The seed will germinate, even those light germinating ones that need light will germinate through this. And sand, much sand is often, of course, it's often made of quartz and often clear, so that you can get through that too. So about like so. Well, the reason we're doing that is we are helping to prevent damping off. Damping off is a general term for a fungus or bacteria that can rot seedlings. So if you ever grown seeds and they just kind of just rot down, that's damping off that's caused that. So, and then, oh, by the way, make sure you have a label. I use plastic in this case. I tried to be sustainable and used wood. And what happened was by spring, it molded. I couldn't even read what the label was. So that was an issue. So I've put down the name, the Asclepias tuberosa, and the Equilegia canadensis. I put the date and I'm putting it here. And I know that the butterfly weed is on that side and that's on this side. So you're going to cover this up. Just take some duct tape and put it around the container and you're good to go to put outside for the winter. And put it in an eastern location. I like that's what I like, a morning sun. And what you're creating is a little mini greenhouse, and things will germinate even faster than the outside. But we'll talk about the issues with that too. Well, want to make sure that you don't leave it covered the entire spring. We'll talk about that as we go. All right, so I'm going to get back to my screen. And so we've talked about butterfly weed. We're good that way. And here's also what I have done is, let me get my video going. You don't have to watch me, but just have it. What I've also done, I like to do, is actually, instead of pricking out teeny tiny seedlings, I let them grow up. And in the milk container too, before I will then take the entire container and put it into a gallon pot. Oh, also, I don't know if you noticed, but did you notice that I had the soil level in the container, the milk container, really deep? And that's why I leave it in. It's fairly deep and it has some root room. The milkweeds are tuberous. In fact, Asclepias tuberosa, that's what it means. It has a little tuber. And so they'll grow that, and having a deep pot like that can help. So I haven't even separated. I haven't even pricked out these seedlings. I just put them in a big pot, and then I'll plant them out in the late summer and let them, pot them on a little bit. You can also prick them out and put them in pots and then gradually change the pots. I'm a little lazy. I don't do that, but if you probably will get, potentially you'll get more plants doing it that way. So, all right. Oh, I just like this color combination here. This very fashionable coral hair streak is same color as the, these, of course, milkweeds attract so many different butterflies and bees. Of course, they're the food plant of the monarch butterfly. So we want to plant lots of milkweeds. How many people have seen native butterfly weed in the wild in Connecticut or elsewhere? Probably not that often these days. All right, a couple other, we're going to go over some of these. I don't have examples of all the plants, right? But I'm just going to highlight a few examples. Also, purple coneflower, a very easy plant to do from seed, not native to Connecticut, but it is such a great pollinator plant that I included it. I had, oh, by the way, that's the state bird of New Jersey, the American goldfinch. The joke was the state bird of New Jersey is dead. That's not true. It's this bird, an American goldfinch. The state mineral is concrete. That's not true either. I'm from New Jersey, can you tell? But anyway, here we go. The state, this seed head, by the way, leave some of your seed heads in the garden like echinacea because goldfinches feed on it. And so really good for winter food for some of those. Check this out. At the Peabody Museum, a few years ago, I was leading a seed propagation workshop. And after a rain, I looked out on the seed heads of purple coneflower and they were germinating on the seed head. So pretty crazy. This is very easy, as you can tell. If you have the single flowered purple coneflowers, or you probably see seedlings around it. So yeah, that is, that's pretty wild. So this is, an A germination. It like acts as an annual, but it also it needs the cold moist. You probably get better germination for all your seeds if you did it cold and then warm, cold moist and then warm. All right, some other bee germinations. So this is a member of the pea family, wild senna, Senna hemicarpa. And this is one that, being in the pea family, you can scarify between two sheets of sandpaper. The only thing is, once you do that, I would do that sort of late winter and then plant it out, because if you were to do that in the fall when it was warm, it might germinate pretty quickly. And so again, have to be a little careful with that. So it needs light to germinate, or it needs that scarification too, but it only takes 10 days once it's been scarified or put between two pieces of sandpaper for a little bit, that it only needs a short period before it will then germinate. So if you've exposed it to the cold moist for a while, then you could do that, or put it in your fridge in a little bit of moist vermiculite. That's even another option than using these milk containers. You could use your fridge if you wanted to. There's lots of options. By the way, this is the food plant of the cloudless sulfur butterfly. I actually had a caterpillar on one of my plants in my yard. I like the architectural seed pods here. You can see the seed, the pea family, that is the pea family. It looks like those pea pods. It's an architectural plant. This gets pretty big. It gets to be about 6 feet. So it's something to put as a statement. Member of the pea family is partridge pea. This is an annual, but it needs cold, moist, and then warmth and in order to germinate. So yeah, you might need to scarify it, but it will only last one season. But it'll seed itself in the soil. Eventually, through time, the seed coat will break down and new plants will come in. So once you've grown it and you have one plant, let it go to seed, and you can sprinkle the seeds around and then try growing some yourself too. All right. What else we have here? Oh, okay. So here is Joe Pieweed and members of the aster family, another great bee germinating plant. White snake root also. These are all the cold, moist, and then warmth. I'm just going to zip through some of these. New England aster, a really great, these are all great pollinator plants, by the way, and really important. And not only that, that they're also food plants for for many of our Lepidoptera, the butterflies and moths. One of my favorite goldenrods, by the way, as you probably know, goldenrods do not cause allergies or hay fever. It's the plants that are growing near them that do around them. So yeah, this is blue stem goldenrod, one of my favorites. This grows in dry shade. How good is that? And another name is wreath goldenrod. So it looks like a little wreath of yellow arching over. Only gets to be about 2 or 3 feet. An easy one to do from seed. So you can have a nice little patch of that in at the edge of your, underneath a tree, and like sort of the edge. Ironweeds are great pollinator plants. I banded a monarch butterfly, and it was on one of the ironweeds I had in my yard. How many? This is out front or the back door of my house, some outbuildings, but how many great spangled fritillary butterflies do you see on the ironweed there? It's like I count 3. So yeah, they're really good. Oh, by the way, this butterfly needs violets to feed on. It's nectaring on ironweed, but it needs violets so save some of your violets. Don't weed them all out. You'll have fritillaries. Many of our asters are really great. They're creating, as you can see, a lot of these plants are creating landing pads for pollinators, right? So they have often small flowers in an umbel or a raceme or however, flat top cluster. This is flat topped aster. America's favorite wildflower is probably cardinal flower. And it's interesting in that it has, where it lives in the wild is riverbanks and muddy banks of streams and rivers. And it will then set seed in open soil. That's what it needs to. So if you grow a cardinal flower, they're not very long lived. You want to have bare soil around it, because that will assure that more plants will then seed in and continue. Also, the relative blue lobelia is the same way. They both have teeny tiny seed. They're dust-like seed, but so they need to be sown on the surface. And also, the other trick to growing both these plants is you don't want to put mulch right up to them. They get a winter rosette, a rosette of leaves that'll last through the winter, and they'll turn sort of a maroon color, but you don't want to cover it over with soil. They need to get light. And so that's another way to make it last a little longer. Blue lobelia lasts longer than cardinal flower, but again, if you have bare soil around it, you can even take seed and just put it around the plants that you have. Get seed from it and then spread it around and try to continue it. And as you know, a great plant for our native ruby-throated hummingbirds. I planted a red buckeye, not native to Connecticut, but the Appalachians. But it's a small buckeye, about 20 feet. And I heard from one of the Master Gardener talks that when this is in bloom, the ruby-throated hummingbirds have arrived. So that's a great sort of gardener's almanac, like phenological type of trend that, when this is in bloom, that's the time that, the ruby-throated hummingbirds are back, which is kind of cool. They, of course, need tubular flowers in red and orange, but of course, blue as well, other colors. And this is the fruit from that tree. And I once let some of these nuts drop, and I found some plants growing up in other places. The squirrels have buried them. So if you want to grow these, put them in a big pot, and which is what I've done this year, and I covered it over with screen, because the white-footed mice, the rabbits, the squirrels, voles, they'll all get into things like that, and they'll eat them. So you want to screen them over. Interesting thing that our native oaks, and remember the top wildlife plant, one of the best native plants you could ever have, 470 species of Lepidoptera. I'm going to hit that home again. Doug Ptolemy has a book out, The Nature of Oaks, just came out recently. Great book, highly recommend it. But anyway, if you want to know the difference between our acorns, the one on the left, with the ski cap, It looks like a beanie that you put on is a white oak or the white oak group. In this case, it's a white oak, northern white oak. The one on the right is northern red oak, and it has a beanie, or not a beanie, but what's the French called? French things, whatever that's called. That hat, and so that's one way you can tell the difference. Also, very
Hooray.
thank you. I knew somebody would shout it out. Thank you very much. A beret. So that's how you tell the difference. And also, if everybody looks at me, I have a bag here. I'm not going to change this and get it off this, but I have a bag here of white oak acorns. These, some of these are chestnut oaks. And interesting thing is that check this out. I'm going to look at this. Our white oaks, members of the white oak group, get their radical, or their first root that comes out of them in the fall. And so I had these in my fridge. I'm going to plant them in a big pot and put them out very soon. And so that gets this radical in the fall. In the fall, the red oaks don't do this until the spring. Well, our squirrels love these. They're sweeter than the red oaks, and they will eat them first. That's one reason why you don't see that many white oaks compared to red oaks around. So I think a lot of these are chestnut oak, which is a type of white oak in that group, but kind of cool. Oh, by the way, these have to stay moist. So if I left this bag out and it dried out, these would be dead. So you want to either store them in your fridge. I should have put a little bit of vermiculite in there and I didn't, but they seem to be doing okay. Another thing, once you plant some of our trees and shrubs, you might want to put a little collar to keep the voles from digging and eating the seeds. So I can use a little plumber's pipe. That's fine. I would cut an angle at the bottom to help you sink it into the ground. And then when that seedling comes up, you could raise it up as you go. Eventually you might want to put a wire cage around it for deer, for a little while. All right, so many of our dogwoods, think about the amount of leaves for our Lepidoptera to feed on. You have a lot more than herbaceous plants, and also a lot more fruits and flowers in our trees and shrubs. So always don't forget about our trees and shrubs being very, very important. Maple leaf viburnum is another one, or shrub dogwoods, by the way, that I just showed you that one. They attract a lot of birds. And maple leaf viburnum, that needs that D, it needs to dry out, needs to stay warm and cold and then warm again. So that's a D. You're going to get these codes, so don't worry about that. Another great native shrub. Gets to be about 3 feet tall max. White flowers, nice berries for birds in the fall, and very, very cool shrub, native shrub. Closed gentian grows along riverbanks. It needs a bumblebee to pollinate it. This is kind of an advanced seed to grow. You might need to have this in a milk jug for a couple years, and also, or a container. Because it's slow growing, but it has a small seed. It needs light to germinate, but check out the bluish flower on the left side. It has a bumblebee in it. So this depends on bumblebees to pry into the flower and get to pollinate it. So here our mountain mints are probably one of the top pollinator plants. Not beautiful flowers, compared to some, but they really are great. And they're very fragrant leaves. I often plant mountain mints and also non-invasive cat mints and around the edges of my borders in the yard, because deer don't like to step on them. So little trick there. But this has very, very tiny seed. Again, you're going to need to sprinkle on the surface. Don't plant it deeply. Our liatris mountain, or which are blazing stars, or other names, common names, they're not native to Connecticut. Well, actually, there is one species, and I'll show you that. This is one from the Midwest, but the Liatris ligulostylus, Rocky Mountain blazing star. But our monarchs really love that plant. You've seen this in the garden trade. Any of those? These can, the regular bee germinators, the cold, moist, then warm. Here's the native one that we have to Connecticut. It is a listed species, though. So this is one that grows along our seashores and really dry areas. Yeah, New England blazing star. And that brings up a point. You don't want to really collect seed from preserves or endangered populations. So they really need to be in the wild. All right, so I mentioned this already. Cut your holes in the milk jug, cut it out, but leave a handle, and then plant your seed mix. Notice I didn't plant deep enough here. This is an earlier slide, and I used wood instead of plastic. By the way, you can use a plastic milk jug, a white plastic milk jug, and make more labels if you wanted to. I'm going to just whip through these real quickly. This is an eastern aspect to my yard. That's where I've planted them out. So there they are with the duct tape. They have holes poked in the bottom. The tops do not have the caps, so please make sure you have the caps off when you do that. And then come spring, it's so exciting to see these little seedlings popping up. This is probably a whole bunch of seedlings of planted quite thickly, but I think this is blue vervain. Yeah, Verbena hostata. Here we have the butterfly weed I showed you earlier. I'm letting these grow pretty tall, right? And then I'll put them into the big pot. Here is Zizia aurea, golden Alexanders. Look at how tall that thing. That's probably like 2 feet tall. I'm kind of lazy, as I said. You're not going to get as many plants, but you'll get the big plants. You'll be ready to plant them out rather than having to pot on. It's all what you want to do, how many plants you want to have. So here it is. I've created a little raised bed, and here's golden Alexanders. Here's the flower. You can also non-native, but you can use fennel. Fennel and parsley and dill are all food plants of the black swallowtail butterfly. So make sure you leave some. If you do herbs, leave some for the butterflies. It's a beautiful butterfly, as you see, on wild bergamot, another native to Connecticut. And boneset is another one. These are all those bee germinators, folks. And here it is in the. So this brings a point. When you, and I'm almost done here. I realize, gone over a little bit. I apologize. Make sure you lift the top off in the spring to when you are, to make sure that it doesn't fry, right? So once you get into the really warm temperatures, make sure you do that. All right, Liatris, I'm going to whip along here. You've seen that plant before. You can also put things in pots. This is Heather McCargo at Wild Seed Project in Maine, does it this way. Just take pots, put them in there, make sure they have, the bottoms that can drain out, and you can cover that with screening. I've done a little seedling bed, and then I've created a little shade cloth on it, and I get good. So I plant on that way. There's many ways to do this. There's also a couple resources. I'm almost done here. Ecotype Project is through Connecticut NOFA. They have started offering native seed. So native ecotype seed. So they're really good to have. Eco 59, if you keyed in, Connecticut Ecotype Project, you'll get to this. And they are starting to offer this. So it's pretty cool. Also, I started with another master gardener, Betsy Goldberg. The two of us started a pollinator seed library at the Hamden Public Library. So you can actually go and get free seeds of native plants and others, and some veggies and other things too. So if you go to, if you go to the Hamden Public Library, you might not, their site, you might not see it, but it's, this will be in the resources. So you'll get the resource for you for that. And that's it. So I'm sorry, I just realized I went over a little, no, it's actually 4 o'clock, but I might have gone over a little bit, but I'm happy to answer any questions.
There are a couple questions.
Mm-hmm.
I'm trying to read them. Diana, do you want to unmute and ask your question? Because I don't understand the sharp sand.
Oh, I think Jim actually talked about Wild Seed Project in Maine. They do them in 4-inch pots, and then they cover with like that sharp sand, something like a builder's sand, and then
Right.
they put the heavy duty chicken wire, not chicken wire, but heavier duty than chicken wire.
Yeah, or window screening is fine. Yes.
Okay. So,
yeah, thanks, Diana.
So
yeah,
my question was, do you find that the milk jug method is better? Or try both and see which works best for you, or what?
Yeah, I haven't tried the other. The thing I like about doing the milk jug is it acts like a sort of a mini greenhouse. And I think you might have quicker germination once the temperatures start to warm. It'll warm up more quickly. But as I mentioned, you want to make sure that you don't have that lid on once things really heat up, or you'll fry everything. So there's a little bit of a fine line, but you'll have plenty of time to do that before things really get warm. So that's what I like about it. But I have to admit, I have not tried the other method. Yeah.
Another question really quickly. How often do you have to check to make sure the soil doesn't dry out? Because the top of the milk jug is very small as far as letting moisture in.
Mm-hmm. So you usually can tell that by how heavy it is. So, and if you need to, you just, take a spray bottle and go out, or just a very light, a water container with a rose that, has a fine amount of water coming out. You don't want to put shoot a lot of force on the water. You might spread your seeds around a little bit, but and do that particularly in the spring. I mean, once this jug, it'll freeze, right? So you don't want to be adding water if it's frozen and if it feels kind of heavy. So that's how you can tell. I want to go back to that sharp sand. You don't want to use play sand, because sometimes it's salty and that might not be good for plants. That's something that you really want to think about. Sharp sand is also builder sand, they call it, but also I've heard it called masonry sand. So it has, bigger grains than the really fine grain sort of play sand type thing. Yeah.
Okay, and we had one more question, just a review of something that you had mentioned. I don't remember this, but they were wondering if you could review the part about poking a hole in the jug. Did we talk about poking a hole in the jug?
Yes, sure. So all it is I've heard, there's various ways you can do this, but if you look at my picture, there's holes in the bottom. All I've done is just poked a hole in each corner, just so there are 4 holes. That seems to be fine for me. And I'll use a pointed, I've even, like a utility knife to just cut little triangles out. That seems to work well. Somebody mentioned the other day, I was doing a program, can you use like a hot glue gun? That worked fine too, if you want to do that. So whatever works, but just small holes in the, so all you need about 4 holes, and you're fine. And I just noticed Lyme Library is starting a seed library too soon, which is, Diana mentioned, that's great.
Yeah, that's the new buzz in town. We're going to try and get a seed library started.
That's great. That's great.
Does anyone else have any other questions for Jim while we have him? Well, we have some resources and a resource list that we're going to send out, and I'll send that out to everybody. And at some point, I will edit down this video, and I'll make sure that that's available for everybody to review again. And I think there are some people that wanted to see this and join, but were not able to. So I'll make sure everyone else gets to see that too.
Great.
And everybody says, thank you so much. Thank you. Very helpful. It was a great time. Jim, thank you so much for your time. It was nice to meet you.
Great. Yes. And I hope that everybody can do their part and help wildlife with native plants, and gradually lose part of your lawn and do what you can. That'd be great.
Excellent.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you, everybody.
Okay.
Have a great rest of your weekend.
Take care. Thanks a lot.
Bye-bye.